Let me ask, of the old adage in boxing, the great big man beats the, or the good big man beats the good little man?
But that's what they say, but it's not always the case. You know, when you look at all the great little mans that moved up in weight, they beat the great big man. You know, a lot of people, they running with that narrative. Who came up with that?
That's a great question. Who came up with that? Last Saturday, seeing Terence Crawford dominate Canelo Alvarez just made me rethink some of the myths about boxing and MMA that I've been hearing for a long time, but I've always felt like there's something off about some of these myths, but it's been around and it's been said for so long that you just have to take it as truth. And that's something I kind of want to challenge in this video. I want to talk about the 5 biggest myths that I think can be debunked by some evidence from fighters in both boxing and MMA. And the first myth is the good big man beats a good little man. For this one, we don't have to look too far back in the past. We just need to take a look at last Saturday when Terence Crawford beat Canelo Alvarez, and he moved up 14 pounds up, and he moved up 2 weight classes, and he went out there and he dominated Canelo Alvarez. Not only did he do that, but Alexander Usyk has also made a change from the cruiserweight division to the heavyweight division, where he dominated guys like Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury and Daniel Dubois, and he beat them all twice. And sometimes he was fighting them while they had like a 30 to 40 pound weight advantage, and he was still able to go out there and dominate them as the little man. And in MMA, you look at guys like Ilia Topuria when he moved up to fight Charles Oliveira. I mean, he squashed them, even though he was the lighter man and he was the guy that was moving up to Oliveira's weight class. We also saw this with Henry Cejudo when he took on Marlon Moraes. He was a flyweight fighter, 125 pounds. He moves up to 135 pounds and he knocks out Marlon Moraes. And we also had Max Holloway move up to the lightweight division to take out Justin Gaethje. And obviously there's plenty of examples of the big man beating the little man, but it is important to mention that it's not always the case that the big man is going to beat the little man when both guys are equally as skilled. You never know what can happen in a fight, and as we've seen time and time again, the little man can win. Moving on to the next myth I like to debunk, and that's that your prime is only 2 to 3 years. And I feel like this one is false, and it really depends on the fighters themselves. It depends on their lifestyle, their fighting style. Like, if it's someone who heavily relies on their like athleticism and they don't really develop those skills quite as much, then yeah, sure, you might see them be on top for like maybe 2 to 3 years, even longer than that. Even if you say it's only 2 to 3 years, it can be longer than that, even if a guy is just relying on their natural gifts, their natural athleticism. We've seen guys like Roy Jones, like his prime was a lot longer than 2 to 3 years. Like you see in MMA, you see a guy like Michael Venom Page, he's got crazy reflexes and he's still able to fight the same way, and it's been a lot longer than 2 to 3 years. You have guys like Max Holloway, who's arguably been in his prime for over 6 years, from the time he first got the featherweight title to arguably even like still right now. The main reason why this narrative even exists is because anytime a fighter doesn't look good, anytime a fighter has a close fight or even loses a fight, people are so quick to basically say, oh, you're washed, you're done, you're past your prime, you should retire, because they've lost one fight or they don't look that great in one fight, so they assume that that fighter isn't as good as they once were. But no, the case is sometimes you just run into someone who has a calculator for your math problems and they can just solve everything in an instant, but then you meet a guy and your next opponent who just doesn't have that same calculator and you're able to do whatever you want. So it's just a matter of styles, and we can't just judge the fighters based on one fight. And I made that mistake. I picked against Terence Crawford simply because I thought he was past his prime because of his fight with Israel Madrimov. He didn't look as great as he did against Errol Spence, and I thought, okay, maybe he's aging, maybe it's the weight, maybe it's X, Y, and Z, but no, it's just a style of the opponent that made Terrence Crawford look like that. And you also look at a guy like Floyd Mayweather, who was able to dominate for so long and be in his prime for X amount of years, even though, like we talked about earlier, people say it's only 2 to 3 years, but again, that is not the case. But moving on to the next myth I like to debunk, and that's going to be losing your chin after you get KO'd. And I've heard guys like Joe Rogan talk about this. I've heard Rampage Jackson say the same thing about Chuck Liddell, and that was the case for one individual, but it's not the case for everyone else. We've seen other fighters like Glover Teixeira get knocked out several times in his career, and then towards the end of his career, we saw that he had an incredible strike resistance. He was getting blasted with punches, knees, elbows, kicks, and he was able to take some of those big shots. We also saw Dustin Poirier get knocked out by Justin Gaethje late in his career at UFC 291 in 2023, and then Dustin Poirier came back in 2024, and he had 2 wars, one against Benoit Saint-Denis, and then one against Islam Makhachev, and if that wasn't enough, he went through another 5-round war against Max Holloway, and he did get dropped in that fight, but his punch resistance was still there, his chin was still there, he was still able to take some massive shots without getting slapped. And what I think that comes down to is the recovery of the athletes. Obviously, Chuck Liddell was a fighter back in 2008, 2007, and the sport was still evolving at that point. And even fighters like Mike Tyson, who when they got knocked out, then it'd be easier to knock them out and they wouldn't recover quite the same. It's mainly because of the recovery, in my opinion. Well, back then, there wasn't as much tools to help you recover, to help you rest, and really make sure you come back at 100% as there is now. And I think that's what we're seeing. And I feel like this myth was applicable back in the day, but now it's different. The fighters can get knocked out and recover really well by, recovering properly, resting, and doing the right rehab measures to make sure they're back at 100% the next time they get into that ring or octagon. The next myth I want to debunk is that power is the last thing to go. For this, I like to look at Canelo Alvarez, and to be fair to him, he didn't move up a lot in weight, but he did move up to the 175-pound division, and he did score some knockouts there, maybe just one knockout, but yeah, when he fought guys like Edgar Berlanga, he was able to hurt him, he was able to drop him, but he wasn't able to get him out of there, even though in Berlanga's very next fight, he was stopped by Hamza Shiraz. And against Canelo, Berlanga was nothing but a punching bag. He just sat there, he was taunting him, he wasn't, he threw and landed maybe 5 right hands in that whole fight. He wasn't doing anything. He was just sat there, and most of the time he wasn't moving his feet. He was just staying right in front of Canelo, and Canelo still didn't put him out of there. And then there's the Munguia fight, and Munguia was a very inexperienced guy. He did have a lot of fights, but Canelo is by far the best fighter he'd ever fought and has ever fought. And Canelo was able to floor him, but he wasn't able to put him away. He was hitting him with some clean shots, but he couldn't put him away. Even though in his next fight, Jaime Munguia would actually get knocked out by a lesser opponent. And what I'm trying to say is that Canelo is fighting guys maybe with not the greatest chins, but he's not able to put them away, definitely. He's able to hurt them, but not put them away compared to before when he was able to KO guys like Amir Khan with one punch. Or even a guy like Caleb Plant, who has shown that he has actually a really good chin. He went out there against David Benavidez, and David Benavidez, although he has a lot of power and he's much bigger than Canelo, he wasn't able to put Caleb Plant out of there. Another example in MMA of someone that's losing their power first is a guy like Michael Van Page. I mean, this guy was putting people away with his punches. He had heavy hands and he was able to find the target and put them away. But now, when you see him land clean shots on his opponent's chin with his punches, you see that it's not having the same effect and his opponents are able to take those shots. And MVP is a guy that's known for using his athleticism, but that still hasn't gone away. He's still just as fast. He's still got that crazy reaction time. And yeah, everything is there. It's just his power. His punching power isn't quite there. So the myth about your power being the last thing to go, I don't think it's quite true. And then you look at Deontay Wilder, how he was fooling guys. But then he's hitting Zhilei Zhang with powerful shots. He's hitting Joseph Parker with powerful shots. It's not having quite the same effect. And obviously, you could say that he's fighting better opponents, but he fought Tyson Fury, and Tyson Fury is a great opponent, and he was able to floor him several times. And then there's Jan Blachowicz, legendary Polish power. I mean, he's knocking everybody out. He's knocking Luke Rockwood out. He's knocking Corey Anderson out. Dominic Reyes, like, he's barely touching him, and they go down. But then he goes out there against Alex Pereira, who's been knocked out 2 months before, out cold by Israel Adesanya, and he's moving up in weight. And now Jan Blachowicz is like hitting him with some clean left hooks and clean punches, and Pereira is able to take those shots. And by the way, that's another example of why the big man doesn't always be the little man, because Pereira was the smaller guy, and he was moving up in weight, and he still went out there and he beat Jan Blachowicz. But Blachowicz's power wasn't quite there, and it wasn't as evident as it once was. So overall, in some cases, power is not the last thing to leave a fighter. But moving on to the last myth that I would like to debunk, and that's that big power punches or muscular fighters don't have endurance. There are several examples in MMA and boxing. In boxing, you've got Daniel Dubois, who is a big, muscular guy, and he's a big power puncher. But you see that he kind of has an engine on him. We saw the Philip Hrgovic fight, where Hrgovic was supposed to be the better technical fighter, the guy with the better gas tank, and overall the better boxer, but that was not how it played out. Daniel Dubois actually went out there and he outpaced and overwhelmed Philip Hrgovic with his power and his punching volume, and he looked like the fresher fighter by the end of the fight, or by the time he got the stoppage. Then you look at Anthony Joshua, a guy who was called a bodybuilder by Tyson Fury. He goes out there against Vladimir Klitschko in the hardest fight of his career. It goes up until the 11th round. Anthony Joshua has said the cameras, it's a grueling fight. It's a high-paced fight, and he gets a stoppage victory in the 11th round, still showing that he was still as effective that late into a fight, despite the fact that he is a big muscular fighter. But then looking at MMA, you look at guys like Kamaru Usman, who has knockout power. He's a muscular fighter, but he was able to keep up with a guy like Colby Covington and actually finish him in one of their fights in the 5th round. Then in MMA, there was also Dricus du Plessis, there's Arman Tsarukyan, Rafael Fiziev, who was able to get a stoppage victory in the 5th round of one of his fights against Rafael dos Anjos. There's Bilal Muhammad, there's Jack Della Maddalena. There's a lot of fighters who have these big muscles, or they got knockout power, but they're still able to go the distance. So that myth is completely out the window. And also the myth that volume punchers don't have power is out the window too, because we've seen Max Holloway be a volume puncher, but also still be able to go out there and put away a lot of his opponents. So overall, I feel like we need to start taking some of these myths with a grain of salt, because a lot of the times we just hear them once, we hear a lot of people say it, and we just take it as gospel truth. But a lot of times it's not true, and I hope that in this video I've been able to show that there are some cases where those things aren't true, or maybe there's even more than just some, and maybe majority of the time those things are not true that are being said by everybody. So let me know your thoughts down below. What myth is the most illogical to you, and what myth do you think should be debunked the most? But thank you guys for watching. God bless, and I'll see you in the next one.
Women weaken legs.